Mikal, can you see on the video, like the corners?
No, it's
Okay, just making sure.
it's zoomed and
Oh.
on just YouTube.
Okay.
No, is yours zoomed or that's the normal shot?
That's fine. Right?
Look now. That's good. It's good. It's good.
I'll give my eye to everyone while we get our cameras situated for some reason. The cameras is not cooperating with us today, but we're going to get it together. Do our answer. You know, sometimes technology don't be wanting you to do what you wanted to do. All right. Here we go. We good? We good? Okay. You gonna turn a light on or the lights? What are we doing? That's the one you want, right? Okay. All right. All right. On Kemmunion, everyone. Welcome for thank you for joining us for today's communion, our regularly scheduled communion, which we do every other Sunday. We're live streaming our communions on Facebook and on YouTube, so we're dual casting today and always. And this format sticks very closely to the way that we run communion when we're in person. And it's a little different from the format that we do on the alternate Sundays, the Crook and the Flail episodes that take place later in the day on the alternate Sundays, where we have a little bit more interaction, question and answers, and etc. So I'd like to get started today with our opening prayer. So we begin by saying, Amatu impanatir, Sauek tuem impanatir, Auduaoma, Kedipa Heru. The translation is give yourself to Netter daily, keep yourself for Netter daily, and may tomorrow be as today. We give homage to the Creator, who is like our Father and who is like our Mother, who is everything that we can perceive and everything that we cannot perceive, who is everything and yet is no one thing, who comes to us in the form of the Neteru Ra, who is the light of the heavens, the light of the inner planes, as well as the light of our lives, who shines the light for us on the path of Ma'ati, which is the path of truth, justice, righteousness, and harmonious balance, who comes to us in the form of the light of vitality, giving us the strength and the endurance to live and act upon that which we know to be true. Homage to you, the one who shines in and through us as a beacon of light for those who are blind to the facts of their place, their responsibility in the divine scheme of things. May we be Ma'akaru, true of thought, word, and deed, to our highest reality, and in the moments of crises and the dark nights of the soul when it appears that everyone and everything else has let us down, so it is and so shall it be. Amen Ma'at. And everyone say Ma'akaru. Duanata. All right, so before we get into the word for today, let's get into our roll call and find out where is everybody joining us from today. I see we've got about 38 people on Facebook. We've got 9 people on YouTube. So where is everybody joining us from today? We want to start with our roll call. We've got Cleveland, Ohio, chiming in, watching on YouTube. We've got Newark, New Jersey, Philadelphia on Facebook, the ATL, Irvington, Woodbury, Westfield, New Jersey. That's what's up. Altonongton, Sonicat. All right. Newcastle, Delaware, Oakland, California, Spartanburg, South Carolina, Bloomfield, New Jersey, North Carolina's in the building, Columbus, Ohio's in the building. That's what's up. Boston. Nice to meet you, Charity. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Linden's in the building. The Bronx is in the building. Oklahoma's in the house. Lawrenceville, Georgia. Hmm? Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's good.
We got the Bronx. We got Deptford, New Jersey. All right. So we got you guys representing from all over. That's what's up. Alutinongton Ikurti. It's good to see you on, my love. All right. That's what's up. Okay. All right. So again, thank you so much for joining us, for taking the time out of your day and putting things, in place so that you could prioritize being here with us. You're very welcome, in Lafayette, Louisiana. I hope your package arrived safely. It sounds like it arrived quickly. Do our netter for that. Indianapolis, Indiana is in the building. Harlem in the building.
All the world.
Yeah. Yeah. We are still shipping products. So thank you for mentioning that. I do know that people have said that there's been a lot of shipping delays, so I'm glad that you didn't experience that. And thank you to those of you who continue to support us, who continue to use the Naswt candles and reach out about Naswt's books, Art of Prayer. Thank you for all of the donations that you guys continue to make to support our work and support our efforts. They're greatly appreciated. The investments that you make in the temple and the investments and the energy that you give to us is greatly and deeply appreciated. And so we're thankful for that energy and for that support to help us to continue the work that we do. We got South America in the building. Someone joining us all the way from Chile. That's what's up. Yes, I love that. We international, y'all. All right, good. Yeah, so yesterday we had our second orientation for First Eye on Kemet. And we decided to record the second orientation because we had a number of people who were not able to make it, who were still interested in taking the class, possibly. So we're gonna post the link to listen to the audio recording on Facebook later today, so that if you are interested in listening to the recording and learning more about the course, you can do so at your own leisure. But we do have a number of people already signed up for the class, and we would like to set a start date real soon. I think we're going to look at the end of this month. So that would mean you guys have probably about a week left to complete registration. For anyone who is not registered yet and who's on the fence, if you listen to the orientation and you think you want to join this cycle, you'd have probably about till the end of this week to do so. So I just want to put that out there, just in case there's anyone who is still considering their options or still considering whether or not they're ready for that at this time. And always, you guys can reach out to us on Facebook or via Gmail, a private message, etc., to ask questions and let us know what concerns you have, if maybe you're not ready to make that investment in yourself as far as the First Eye on Kemet class is concerned, or if there's some concerns or questions you have about the course that you need answered. Feel free to reach out. We're really excited about this cycle. This is our first online only cycle. We usually have a hybrid class with people in person and online. So this is the first online only cycle of First Eye on Kemet. And we're really excited about this experience and really excited about the group of people who are going to be embarking on this journey. So we hope that you are able to be a part of that group. So do I know to any other announcements? Okay. All right. So you want me to just dive in?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So I want to continue the conversation that we started last week at the Crook and the Flail. For any of you who have not watched last week's Crook and Flail conversation, I really encourage you to go back to watch it. The last two Crook and Flail conversations, because we really started to just process what's going, or continue processing what's been going on in the world as it relates to the protests, the rallies, and the efforts that we're making as African people to seek justice in this world and to seek an improvement to our condition. in the American society, and for those of us who don't live in America, we are still concerned about making sure that the condition of African people everywhere is improved, and the condition of African people everywhere is just right and true, right? So this conversation today is a continuation of that dialogue. Last week we really spoke a lot about justified anger and wanting to frame how it is that we can think about anger as spiritual people. Like what is the room or the space that we have as spiritual people to be angry? Because, a lot of people will try to tell you that as a spiritual person that you should not express anger, or that you are not allowed to be angry, or that you should not have emotions. And I think that some of what we've been discovering as we process our way through our ancestral teachings, and we talk about our tools, and we talk about the work that we're doing, we come to an understanding that there is not a situation where we don't express or have anger. It is simply about how it is that we allow that anger to play its role in our lives that demonstrates whether or not that anger is justified or unjustified, right? And so that is a part of the conversations we're having around, how do we as spiritual people participate in the rallies? How do we participate in the protests? How do we be out in the streets? How do we support those efforts? How do we frame that as spiritual people? So in thinking about that, last week we talked about the 42 laws of Ma'at, and we know there are a number of laws that speak about how anger should be expressed or processed. One of the laws that we didn't speak about last week says, I have not, or I will not avenge myself. And I made the note that I wanted to revisit that this week, because what I liked about that is the way that our ancestors create this dichotomy between justice and vengeance. Because here you have the 42 laws of Ma'at, and we know that Ma'at itself is justice. We know that one of the cardinal laws of Ma'at is justice, and yet you have the 42 saying, I have not, or I will not avenge myself. So I wanted to kind of talk about what that distinction means. Like, how do we see justice as Ma'at, and how do we see vengeance as Isfet? So to talk about justice as Ma'at, we're essentially talking about what is a just or a fair consequence. Okay? We're talking about how is it that we uphold what is right, true, and good. And this is something that I really like to talk about, because I think it's important that we reframe the way that we think about consequences. The way that we reframe how we think about consequences really helps us in being able to understand and accept the concept of justice. See, justice is not about like, you did evil and therefore we must do evil upon you. That's actually more alignment with vengeance, and we'll come back around to that in a second. Justice is about the consequence matching the action. Okay? Justice means that whenever you do something, every action you take and every inaction you take has a fair consequence to it, right? So if you don't give your child a bath, the consequence of that is your child leaves the house smelly, right? It's not a punishment to your child. It's not a punishment to you. Your child might hate that. They go to school, they get teased for being smelly. It's not because the universe is being mean. It's not because the Netru are mean. It's not because the ancestors are mean. It's a consequence for not taking a bath. If your child goes to school and gets a set of homework and then doesn't do the homework, the consequence of not turning in your homework is you get a bad grade. Your teacher's not mad at you. Your teacher doesn't hate you. Your teacher's not punishing you. Your teacher's not being mean to you. It's a consequence to an action or an inaction in that instance. You didn't do your homework. You didn't pass the test. You didn't study. You got a bad grade. It's a simple correlation between the action and the reaction, or the response to the action, the consequence of the action. It's important to point this out, because a lot of times I find that people go into spiritual work thinking that if I make offerings to the Netru, if I feed my ancestors, I can somehow bribe my way out of bad behavior. And I want to be very clear, there is no bribing your way out of the consequences for your bad behavior.
That's right.
The natural world, the world of nature, the world of the Neteru, always leans towards Ma'at, right? That is the way the birds lean towards Ma'at, the air is about Ma'at, the grass is about Ma'at, the trees are about Ma'at, the sun is about Ma'at, the moon is about Ma'at. The universe will always prefer Ma'at, and it will always lean in the direction of making sure Ma'at is being upheld and making sure Ma'at is being restored. So it is actually really only humans in our so-called free will who sometimes think that maybe because I feel a certain way about something, that maybe I can bend the rules a little bit and I don't have to be 100% about Ma'at in this situation. It is only us as we seek satisfaction. It is only us as we seek to indulge our baser whims. It is only humans who sometimes try to sneak away around justice and sneak around the consequences of our actions or inactions, the consequences of our choices. And that actually segues us right into vengeance, quite frankly. Because vengeance is not about upholding what is right, good, and true. Vengeance really directly is about choosing to harm someone that you've perceived has harmed you. All right? And it's necessary that we use the word perceived in there because vengeance is not always proportionate to the action that has been enacted, right? Vengeance is about your emotions. So it doesn't matter that someone only took $5 out of your purse because you're so upset. You want vengeance, so you want to tear their whole life down. Is that proportionate to the fact that they only took $5 from you? Right? So, and not only that, but vengeance also, because it's about the way that someone perceives a threat or perceives a harm, it also means that the person who enacted the harm may not have had ill intentions. They may not have meant you any harm. They may be apologetic. They may be willing to restore Ma'at. They may be willing to do whatever is necessary to apologize and to create balance in the situation and in the relationship. If you are filled with vengeance, then you are not ready to receive that. You will be prepared to harm them back because you've perceived a harm. And it's not about restoring Ma'at at that point. It is about making sure someone else suffers. So I thought about, again, we're talking about current events here. And I thought about the world that we're in. And I thought, I know my dad is watching. Hey, Dad. Don't distract me. But yeah, so I thought about the world that we're in. And I thought about how we see vengeance in action in the world that we're in right now. And the first example that came to my mind was MAGA, was Make America Great Again. Seriously, that was the first example that came to my mind, and I'll explain why. The Make America Great Again party or movement is vengeance. Here you have a group of white heterosexual men who have perceived that this world of Black people, Hispanic people, women, homosexuals would like to assert their humanity. Those people would like to assert a measure of rights, and they would like to take part in the privileges that the white people, these white men, believe those privileges belong only to them. Let's think about the myths that Americans tell about themselves and about this country. They tell themselves that they left the tyranny of England, they escaped the tyranny of a king to come here to start a land of milk and honey where they could have and be and do whatever they wanted to have and be and do. That myth about how America was founded, that story about who it is that they think that they are, does not include people people of color. It doesn't include black people. It doesn't include homosexuals. It doesn't include women. So now you have a diverse and outspoken world of people who want and who believe that we as human beings deserve to be seen as human beings and to be regarded with the same humanity and the same rights and the same privileges. And the MAGA party sees that. They perceive that as a threat against their own power. They see that as we attempting to take something from them. They see that as we are harming them. They see that as we are diminishing them or lessening them in the world. And so you see the response to that becomes violence against us, violence against black people, violence against Hispanics, violence against homosexuals. Just yesterday, the president passed something that diminishes the rights of transgender people because they believe so much that they have the right to beat someone to death for being homosexual or for being trans. And we could have a conversation. I'm not going to have this conversation with y'all right now about whether or not homosexuality and transgender is ma'at, because that's not the point. The point is that people are people and people deserve to be treated with respect. That's the point. And when you start rolling back laws that say that treat people, because that's all these laws say. The laws say treat people with respect. And you like, no, I don't want to do that. That's exactly what they're saying. We standing up and we're saying the police aren't treating black people with respect. We demand to be treated with respect. And they're like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to, and I'm not going to. And the fact that we're asking them to do that makes them feel like they're losing a privilege. It makes them feel like they're losing something. It makes them perceive that we are harming them. And as a result, they want to harm us back. So when people ask questions about why the violence has increased, why the animosity has increased, why the anger has increased, the white, cisgendered, heterosexual men of America are consumed by vengeance. They perceive that they have been harmed and they want to harm us back in return. Now, I think it's important that we understand that, because if we claim this is our enemy or this is who we up against, we got to know who we dealing with. So we have to understand that that's the position that they're taking and that's where they're coming from. But I also recognize that I'm sitting here telling y'all not to be vengeful too. And I ask myself the question about whether or not I feel like that stifles us as people of ma'at and as people of righteousness when it comes down to how far we're willing to go to get justice for us, right? Our enemy will do whatever. They have proven that they will do whatever. They will bomb their own government buildings. They will shoot movie theaters up. They will run up in churches. They will bomb churches. They will shoot black men in the back in the street. They have no limits. The enemy has no limits. The villain has no limits. So how do we reconcile ourselves with the idea that our limit has to be justice? Our limit has to be what is right and true, and how it is that we uphold that. I struggle with that. I really do. I find myself watching TV shows and movies, and there's in so many TV shows and movies, there's this energy of the hero versus the villain. And you watch these shows and the hero be like, just stop fighting me so I can put you in jail. Like the hero be like, I just want to lock you up. I'm going to just put you in the insane asylum. I'm going to just send you to get rehabilitated. I'm just going to take away your power. I don't want to have to kill you. Please don't make me have to kill you. And the villain be like, you going to have to kill me. Because I'm going to kill you. You let me go, I'm going to kill you. I'm not going to stop. The hero be like, please just stop. I don't want to kill you. I'm a hero. That's not what heroes do. I have a code. I have morals. I have ethics. And I, as a hero, I, as a Haru, cannot compromise on my morals and ethics just because you do. Just because you don't have a code. Just because you don't live in balance. Just because you don't follow justice. That does not give me the right to violate the code that I hold true. The minute that my code becomes compromisable, my code becomes worthless. The minute that Ma'at becomes compromisable to me, Ma'at becomes worthless to me. Period. So even though in my mind, when I'm watching these movies, and even now as I'm watching us do this work for our African liberation, I'm thinking to myself, on one level, have no limits. And on another level, I know in my heart, Ma'at and justice is always going to have to be our limit. At the end of the day, the question that we have to ask ourselves about every action that we choose to take is, how does this action help me to uphold and restore Ma'at? How does this action help me to uphold justice and restore justice? How does this action help me to uphold and restore truth? How does this help me to uphold and restore balance? How does this help me to uphold and restore harmony? How does it help me to uphold and restore righteousness? How does it help me to uphold and restore order? That must always be the lens through which we view our actions and our choices. Because remember, every action has a consequence. We can choose to do otherwise, but then we cannot avoid the consequence of that choice. You are free to choose. I think you said that a couple communions back. You are free to make whatever choice you'd like, but you are never free from the consequence of your choice.
That's right.
So how is it then that we can strive to be people who stick with justice even when it's difficult, and even when it would be much easier to just be vengeful and to just get and do the things that might be satisfying in the moment, even though we know there might be consequences to that later in the grander scheme of things, right? So the 10 virtues of an initiate gives us some guidance on that, because the 10 virtues of an initiate tells us that we have to have freedom from resentment when we're under the experience of wrongdoing. So again, this conversation goes back to making sure that we understand the difference between the emotions that serve us and the emotions that master us. When you are being mastered by resentment, that is when you are susceptible to wanting to take actions of vengeance. That's when you're susceptible to wanting to do whatever and not care about the consequences. That's when you're susceptible to do whatever, you're at this point, you're seeking your own satisfaction to your own base whims, because you are so consumed by your own resentment that you can't even see straight about vengeance versus justice. So let me be very clear though, being free from resentment does not require forgiveness. I think it's important to say that, because a lot of people don't like the idea, or let me be clear about what type of forgiveness. It doesn't require the type of forgiveness where you've got to be holding hands with your oppressor, singing kumbaya and playing in the meadow and stuff like that. When people hear that word forgiveness, they think that means that means I gotta be best friends with the person that violated me. You ain't gotta be best friends. You gotta be friends. You gotta be associates. Ain't gotta be acquaintances. Ain't gotta know no names. You don't gotta be going to nobody's house for dinner. You ain't gotta invite nobody over. You don't even have to speak in the street.
That's right.
That's not what that means. So just because you're free from resentment doesn't mean you are making peace with that person. It means you're making peace with yourself. Being free from resentment means you're making peace with yourself.
That's right.
Being free from resentment does not mean that you turn the other cheek. It doesn't mean that you give the violator another opportunity to violate you. That's not what that means. It doesn't mean that you make yourself a victim. In fact, our ancestor Kunanuk told us to punish those who deserve punishment, and none will equal your righteousness. So Kunanuk is talking about Ma'at here. He's talking about justice. If someone deserves punishment, then they will get punishment, because that's justice. That's the fair and proper response, consequence to the action that they've taken. They've done something wrong, and therefore they get a consequence for it. And as long as you do that, none will equal your righteousness. That's what our ancestors told us. So this is not a situation where the person who violated you doesn't have to go to jail or doesn't have no consequence happen to them at all. That's not what we're talking about. Freedom from resentment requires you to not be bitter and angry. That's what freedom from resentment means. Freedom from resentment means that you have taken the proper holistic approach to process and to heal your emotions. Freedom from resentment means your emotions serve you and not the other way around. Freedom from resentment means you're not walking around holding on to regrets, holding on to fear, holding on to resentment, holding on to anger. Freedom from resentment means literally you are free from that emotion, and that emotion is not driving you. That emotion is not pushing you forward. That emotion does not need to be fed. Do you understand? The goal in our tradition is that each of us is meant to have a heart that is as light as a feather. So if we have a heart, if we are striving to have hearts that are light as a feather, then our hearts cannot be weighed down by resentment and anger and fear and sadness. Our hearts cannot be weighed down by the things that we struggle with and the baggage that we carry. But that also means that we can't have regrets either. Having a heart as light as a feather, particularly at a time like this, means that we can neither avoid the difficult actions, but nor can we take the unnecessary ones. Y'all understand what I'm saying? You cannot avoid the difficult actions. There are things that need to be done in order to ensure our liberation. We cannot ask for it nicely. That's not what that happens. We said last week, revolutionaries, if you go into war, you can't be expecting to come home from war. You can't be expecting to be safe from war. You cannot expect that you're going to go to war and you're not going to have to die. You're not going to have to bleed. You're not going to have to kill. If you go into war, it's going to get messy. It's going to get nasty. It's going to get ugly. You're going to have to do the difficult things. Period. And to have a heart light as a feather, if you don't do those difficult things, you will regret it. And you will look back at your life and you will question whether or not you made the right choice. And that will weigh your heart down. But conversely, you also cannot make the unnecessary choices.
That's right.
You don't need to do the things that don't need to be done.
Right.
You don't need to take vengeful actions. You don't need to act in anger. You don't need to kill without thought. You don't need to become callous. You don't need to become heartless. You don't need to violate or compromise your code of Ma'at. Because that will make you bitter, angry, and your heart will be heavy. So we have to take the difficult actions, and we also have to avoid the unnecessary ones. That's our charge. My pen is stuck. I can't. Our ancestor Kedi, he told us to do that which is right, so that we may live long upon the earth. And I see that in two ways. Number one, I recognize that having a light heart helps us to live longer, quite frankly. When we hold on to unnecessary emotions, we don't feel good about ourselves. Our emotions get locked in our body, and anything that is spiritual or emotional turmoil eventually becomes a physical challenge.
That's right.
Okay? So just because you don't have cancer now, if you hold in anger and bitterness and resentment in your heart and in your spirit, you're gonna have cancer later. That's where that comes from. Everything physical starts as spiritual and emotional first.
That's right.
So if you are angry and bitter, then you don't do your yoga, you don't stretch, you don't move the body, the meridians are not open, the chakras are not open, you don't eat right, because now you need comfort foods. So you got all the carbs and all the sugar going in, all the sodas, you're eating off cycle, you're eating things you shouldn't, and you're like, oh, it's just a snack here or there, and the next thing you know, it's your whole lifestyle. You done ate a donut every day for 6 months straight. You done gained 40 pounds. And now you start having the health issues. Now you start having things coming up in the body. And those types of issues and diseases, when they come up in the body, they shorten your lifespan. Even if you heal from them, you still had that issue. And it changes the quality of your life. It shortens the length of your life. And it makes it difficult for you to live healthily and happily. When you see elders who are like 90 and they still doing jogs every day, and they still could drive cars because they don't got no eyesight problems, and they doing their stretches in the yard, and they martial artists, and you looking like you probably could beat me up. Those elders have light hearts. Those elders are not holding on to emotions unnecessarily. Those elders are properly processing. Those elders are doing their work. We got to do the same. We want to be 90-year-old elders out there with the skills. We got to do the same thing. But the second way that we see this is that doing that which is right so that you may live long upon the earth. Remember, in our ancestral tradition, we know that we can live forever through the memory of our name. We talk all the time about ancestors and how to venerate our ancestors. And people always ask questions like, yo, I don't really want to feed that ancestor because my uncle was an SOB. Yeah, his name ain't going to live forever on the earth because nobody wants to say his name. He wasn't a good person. He didn't contribute anything well to society. He didn't contribute anything well to my life or to the life of anyone around us. So that ancestor ain't going to live forever through the memory of his name. Or I'm not going to remember his name. I'm not going to speak his name. I'm not giving him energy. Some of us have ancestors like that who we don't want to feed, who we don't want to grow. And then we have those ancestors that gave us life, that fed us every time we came over, that always had a good hug for us, that always had a word of wisdom, that always wiped our tears, that always gave us shelter when we were in pain, that always comforted us and showed us love, even when they didn't have to. Some of them ancestors wasn't even blood related to us. Some of the ancestors that we love and that are beloved to us were not even blood related to us, but they gave us something and they fed us with something. And so we think about them fondly. And when we build our ancestral altars and we do our ancestral work, we remember their names because of the way that they positively and healthily contributed to our lives. And we tell our children about them. And that's how they live for a long time upon this earth. Not just in the physical form, but now once they're no longer in the physical form, we allow them to continue to live because they did what was right. And they get to live a long time because that rightness and that goodness lives on in us. The contributions of our venerated ancestors lives on in us. That's why we still say Malcolm's name. That's why we still say Martin's name. That's why we still say Harriet's name. That's why we still say Frederick's name. That's why we still say Sojourner Truth's name. Because they did what was right and true. Because they uplifted us. And because in turn we must uplift them. And so they live for a long time upon this earth. Sometimes even living forever. I'm going to end sharing my piece by reading from the writings of our ancestor Ptah-hotep. This is in the Hosea, selections from the Hosea. You all know this is one of our recommended books. And I'm reading from the bottom of page 41. I'm going to just read the whole thing through and then I'll go back and we can work our way through it a little bit. Do not terrorize people, for if you do, Neter will punish you accordingly. If anyone lives by such means, Neter will take bread from your mouth. If you say, I shall be rich by such means, you will eventually have to say, my means have entrapped me. If you say, I will rob another, you will end up being robbed yourself. The plans of men and women do not always come to pass. In the end, it is the will of Neter that prevails. Therefore, one should live in peace with others, and they will come and willingly give gifts to you, which another person would take from them through fear. So let's go back. Do not terrorize people, for if you do, Neter will punish you accordingly. If you live by these means, Neter will take bread from your mouth. Now, I realize that for some of us, I'm talking about how we avoid vengeance and how we seek justice and how we err towards justice. And I know for some of us that doesn't feel satisfying. Some of us are like, I gotta wait for Neter to punish them. I want to punish them right now, right? Well, what if Neter don't punish them? Well, what if they get away with it? Nobody gets away with anything. Nobody ever is. Even if you perceive that they getting away with something, nobody has gotten away with anything. And I charge all of us to have a greater sense of faith in the laws of Ma'at, which govern not just human behavior, but the entire universe. everything in the universe. Like I said at the beginning, all of nature, all of the natural laws trend towards Ma'at. So natural law is not going to allow an action to be taken that does not have a karmic Ma'atic consequence. Period. That is what this is about. If you think that talking about Netta or talking about God is spooky, think about just the fact that every action has a reaction. What comes up must come down. As above, so below. It is a natural law of the universe. If you take an action, there will be a consequence from it. If you say, I shall be rich by terrorizing people, you will eventually have to say, my means have entrapped me. If you say, I will rob another, you will end up being robbed yourself. Again, the consequences of your actions are just. They are imbalanced. They are fair. That actually reminds me, I meant to tell y'all before about what Kunanoop said. Our ancestor Kunanoop, he said, justice rightly given neither falls short nor brims over. That's so relevant right here. Because if what you think is justice is disproportionate to the action taken, it ain't justice. If it falls short of justice, it ain't harsh enough. It's not hard enough. It's not in proportion enough. Then you haven't gone far enough. But you also can go too far too. It could brim over as well. If somebody takes $5 out your purse and you be like, I want them in jail for 60 years. That's disproportionate, guys. That's justice that's brimming over. That's vengeance. If somebody takes $5 from your purse and you be like, I don't really want anything to happen to them, it's cool. They can just take that $5. That's very generous of you, but also that's not justice either. That justice would be falling short. So again, justice is about an even and equal consequence to the action that's been taken. The plans of men and women do not always come to pass, for in the end it is the will of Neter which prevails. Ultimately, all of us are subject to natural law, whether we want to be or not, whether we think we are or not. We all have a measure of free will, that's true, but our free will is still we're still a part of the larger universe, and therefore as we act in free will, the larger universe responds to our actions.
That's right.
Period. So there is no situation where we are outside of the natural world. We're not outside of the natural world. Just because, again, we as human beings, we have the right to do things in free will. Like, you don't see the birds or the lions acting outside of their nature. Just because we act outside of our nature doesn't mean that we are not affected by nature. We still have to accept the consequences of nature. We still have to accept, if we throw the natural world off balance, there's still consequences to that. We are not free from that. We are not free from the world that we live in. We are a part of the world we live in. We are one with the world we live in. Everything is interconnected. Okay? Therefore, we should strive to live in peace with others. When we live in peace with others, they will come and willingly give gifts to us, which another person would take from them through fear.
Sorry.
So that's essentially just saying that instead of trying to force people or make people to do, that as we live in alignment with our higher morals and our higher sense of ideals and our higher principles, that we begin to create a society that mirrors what it is that we strive for. Here's the thing, if we want to create a better world and we start that world off through vengeance, through darkness, through bitterness, through revenge, through evil means, if we take justice too far, if we stretch the boundaries of Ma'at, if we compromise on our morals, and that's the way that we start our new world, what is our new world going to look like? That's the question. Like, how do you create a foundation that's shaky? How do you build a house on that? How do you build a future for yourself and for your children if you start off on the wrong foot? So we have to be clear that even though we have to take necessary steps to get what it is that we seek in this situation and in every situation in life, you cannot ever just pray for something or ask for something and then don't take actions to get it. You always have to take actions to get what you seek. But you also have to make sure that you have faith in the universe and faith in your ancestors and in the Netaru as well. That is the balance that we as spiritual people have to have. We have to understand the way that Ma'at works in the world, and we have to be willing to play our part in upholding and restoring Ma'at, and then allowing Ma'at to come forth in ways that we don't even know will happen, in ways that are unexpected, in ways that are unclear, in ways that we can't predict right here and right now. But at the end of the day, just because we don't understand how it's going to happen doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means that there are some parts of the plans of the Netaru that are unseen to us. There are some things about the Netaru that we just don't understand, that are beyond our human scope of understanding. And as we continue to do our spiritual work and continue to develop our own wisdom, our own foresight and insight, our own connection to the divine forces, as we continue to cultivate divinity within ourselves, we may become more and more privy to that understanding. We may be able to see more and understand more and have the foresight and the insight to see things differently than we can with our human minds, especially if our human minds right now are clouded by anger and clouded by resentment. You got to get rid of that. You have to walk away from that, and you have to elevate yourself to a divine being if you really want to understand and see things as the divine see it. Okay? So do our netter. That's what I wanted to share today about justice and vengeance. Do we want to
Let's go to a commercial break and
go
check
into
out
the
what's
chat? Let me come over here first to
put a
YouTube.
cap on it. What else is there to say after that?
Do our
We
netter.
went like three communions strong on justice and vengeance and the difference between the two. So
The thing for spiritualists, we know our chant for harmony and righteousness, but the battle cry and the drums of war must be known and understood as well. You know, to be honest with you, sometimes I think that the battle cry is the same as the chant for righteousness. It's not necessarily a different chant.
it's the only relevant chant.
Is if those of us who understand justice understand that sometimes justice happens through peace and sometimes justice happens through war, and we have to know the right time and the right place for certain actions. So again, that comes back to developing foresight and insight through our spiritual work, and by we master our emotions so that we can see clearly and so that we can activate the divinity within us to understand better and to know how to approach each situation with the right nuance and the right level of intensity. But does not justice also represent receiving the reciprocal actions which your works have sent out? Absolutely. Justice is about consequences. So if you have sat at a table and you had too much food on your plate, and there is another person there who cannot afford food, and you give them your food, there's a consequence for that action, right? So a lot of times people like to call that consequence a reward. They like to say, oh, I've done a good thing, I get a reward. I just like to call it a consequence, because it's not about rewards or punishments. Good actions have good consequences. Poor decisions and poor actions have poor consequences. The universe does not judge, right? The universe, the Netaru are not sitting here being like, you're better than you and you're better than you, and like, because that's not what's happening. A good action happens, it has a good consequence. A poor action happens, it has a poor consequence. It's just that simple. It's just consequences. So whatever you do has a consequence in kind. That's what justice is that it's in kind. It is level and equal to the action that's been taken. One issue that needs to be addressed off the cuff is that this whole planet is about contracting and law and commerce. And when you call yourself black, which means to bleach, to make pale, similar to blanc in French or blanco in Spanish, you are claiming to be civiliter mortus, which means to be dead in the eyes of the law. Black has no standing at law. One must change that syntax and correct one's status to white when contracting in this system. White is a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, Middle East, or North Africa, as I'm sorry, I can't.
Autochthonous.
Autochthonous, thank you, Naswt. We woolly haired Nubians, are indigenous to the entire planet, but due to, I can't see the rest of the comment. Why can't I see the rest of it?
I don't know why.
Can you see it?
I can see it.
But due to the use of the improper syntax, we keep contracting as slaves with no human rights protections. Okay. Do you want to speak to that?
That's an argument.
Yeah. That's a whole dialogue in itself. And I don't know I don't know that I feel like that's relevant to the conversation about justice and vengeance. I think that we'll have to come back around on that. Okay. Love you too, Dad. Okay.
Psychologically, I'll just say I got a problem calling myself white. I understand his point taken, but psychologically, where we're at, it's going to be a lot of resistance getting black people call themselves white and getting white folks to call themselves anything else. So that's a whole uphill journey right there. But I understand legal, the language and all of that, how you present yourself or whatever. And I still even question the validity of that. I question the demonstration of it. I'm still waiting to see the demonstration of the evidence of that fact.
Okay.
So that's an ongoing conversation and dialogue that goes on in our community. But it doesn't diminish people's responsibility for taking action the best way they know how, even if that action is raising hell.
Yeah.
Even if that action is marching. So it's still all strategy. There's no one way that's going to fix everything. We got to hit it at every possible direction that we can. Even if we got to keep the whole nation in unrest till they're ready to have this uncomfortable dialogue.
Yeah.
But I would like to say Dua for the faithful in the unconfrontational chat. So what I'm noticing, our numbers are expanding, and there's less dialogue in the chat, which it shows that people are open. They're open to receive, and not necessarily so fixated on their opinion or articulating their opinion. So I like to believe we have a very respectful and mature crowd. So we thank you for coming to our platform, to having talks about adult spirituality, boss talk, what we call sober spirituality, the sober approach to spirituality, while at the same time juxtapositioning it with magic and mysticism. And yeah, we said it, magic and mysticism. I know some of our peers like to distance themselves from that, and some even try to sanitize it from even discussing it in the same sentence or the same context with African spirituality, and they try to put it on the same level as what we now understand to be science, or the modern approach to science. So I want to address that. We have no issue with the modern approach to science, but when we're talking about our ancestral system, it's not exactly the same as science. So it starts off with an observation of nature, but what we know to be science now, modern science, which is in the hands of white folks, that's what it means when people talk about white science. So it's still in the hands of other folks who have a different cultural paradigm, a different worldview than us. So that worldview is going to affect and influence their conclusions of what they say is scientific fact. So everything that we see them come up with, we have to run it through our cultural filter and decide what it means or how we're going to interpret it. So they become obsessed with objectifying their scientific facts and to improve human life, whether it's vaccines or whether it's technology. But what I see is with their technology, it's always convenient up front, and then you have to pay for it with your health on the tail end. And let's be honest, we're still benefiting off the technology. Here we are, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we got the smartphones, the iPhones, all of that. So we're taking advantage of it. So let's put it in proper perspective. We're not saying that it's all bad. So us as spiritualists, we're still seeking a balance. We're always looking for the balance. The balance is the resolution, not shunning technology and not just uplifting culture and acting like we can't use any of this technology in the culture, because actually, as we currently speaking, we're benefiting it. But when it comes to science from our cultural perspective, we go inside. We see everything in nature is a reflection of things that's already happening, internal processes that's happening inside our body. So within, so without. So we're talking about our organs, our glands, our blood, how we breathe. We understand in our tradition that the body is the tool. While technology, science and technology give us all of these things, that's their tool, while we see that we are the tool. So our science is the science of self, sciency, which means to know the self. So in every bit of technology that they have, it makes our natural science go dormant. So here we are texting, all this stuff in social media. We used to have the ability to communicate with people on a whole different level than we are now. So every time we indulge in this technology, which is good, which could be satisfying, we start losing and start dumbing down our qualities. You remember the days when we had everyone's phone number memorized? Mm-hmm. I can't memorize it for nothing now. So now we got it in the phone, we got the face. So now we're losing gigabytes in our memory because they're making it easy for us. So in their sense, you get the convenient up front and you pay for it with your health around back. So they have fast food. So you got the preservatives in the food. So it's convenient up front. Yeah, you don't have to wait. But on the tail end, 30 years from now, you got to deal with cancer and poor health and failing health. So yes, we have the science and technology that we're using, we're benefiting from, and it's very convenient from us now. But on the back end, we have electromagnetic pollution. We're being inundated with low frequency electromagnetic waves, which is on the end. 30 years from now, we're going to have to deal with science from that. So we're going to have to deal with cancer and poor health from that. So now, in our cultural perspective, we sacrifice up front. Some traditions, they sacrifice animals, but the process of sacrificing up front to get the benefit on the tail end. Mm-hmm. So we sacrifice not indulging so much in fast foods like everybody else. We sacrifice not indulging wholeheartedly into the so-called technology like everyone else. So while on the other end, those who fully embrace science and shun spirituality, as they get older, they start becoming blind, crippled, and crazy. And as we get older, we start having more sustained energy. So we start looking like we're superheroes as we get older, while everyone else just starts withering away. So what we're saying is, as spiritualists, we got to always seek the balance. Yes, we're using the technology, but we're not going to forget about the technology of our ancients either. So when we say sober spirituality, juxtaposition with magic and mysticism through the metaphor of myth. Through the metaphor of myth, we could then access the power of what we consider to be the divine, the deity, the god, the goddess, the force. So that's what we call magic and mysticism. That's distinct from what people are talking about when they're talking about science. So when you start indulging in that science, the science of self, when you start meditating and praying to deity, to God, to Neter, to Neteret, that process opens you to a point where we're encountering God and discovering self are one and the same. Yes. I'll repeat. So you reach a point or plateau where encountering God and discovering self are one and the same thing. Yes. That is the beginning of what we're calling magic and mysticism, and not Western science, which is dependent on instruments and stuff. This is a whole internal process. And what I'm saying is that, like, you could observe things, but then you're going to hit a wall, and at a certain point you're going to have a spiritual technology to transcend that wall. And that spiritual technology is called trance. The Yoruba call it Ilah, which means exalted states, and the Kemetic tradition is Sikh, which is spiritual ecstasy. So you transcend so-called time and space and go to the essence of the knowledge, where you're actually able to experience the knowledge without a mental process. So they say that pseudo because they hit the wall, and they don't want to go through the trance state to actually access the knowledge in its purest form. Yeah. So we have to ask ourselves, when we pray and we meditate on the deity, what happens when the deity meditates on us?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That is the encountering God and the discovering of self.
Yes.
That's why spiritual community is needed.
Yes.
We need a support system to continue this dialogue with what is divine, what is deity, what is God, what is goddess, what is the force, how does it manifest, where does it manifest at, what does it look like, what does it smell like, what does it feel. These are things our communities always came up with. These sciences is how we always sustained ourselves no matter what was going on. So for instance, that's why we have Wet Rim Pet. That is the Kemetic New Year. It means the opening of the year. So we go on a retreat. So we do ceremonies for like four days straight. Very powerful, transformative ceremonies where we try to spend as much time in Elah and as much time in spiritual ecstasy, seek, so we can be in that zone or in that what they call magnetic field, where we're authentically connecting, not philosophizing, but authentically connecting with nature. Sometimes you got to get out of all this so-called science and technology and go back to the original science and technology to get the more healthier expression of what it is that you think you're trying to reach. So one of the things that we do, one of the kesu, the ceremonies that we do, is we have a neb, which is a bowl, and inside the bowl you have the tepre, which is an oracle thing, where they're representative of 5 Neteru. What are the 5 Neteru?
Asar, Haru Or, Satesh, Aset, and Nebuchadnezzar.
So they have representations of scrolls inside this neb. So you pick, or is it the deity picking you? It says the deity picking you. So say Asar picked me. And then Kerheb says Asar picked him also. Then Ma'akra says Asar picked her also. So now Asar comes with a spiritual charge. So all our conversations during the rest of the year needs to be based on how to understand the charge that Asar gave to us. So here it is. I come to my conversation to the beast like, yo, Asar communicated this to me. And the Kerheb would be like, well, that's interesting. Asar communicated this to me. So it's the same, yet it's different. And Ma'akra said, this is what got communicated to me. And it's the same, yet different. So here we have 3 different expressions coming from the same source. So what is it talking about? So what happens is this conversation then enriches our experience and our understanding of the force. So here's when I'm going forth in my life. And I'm just like, and I'm wondering why Asar is not communicating, because we always be trying to control how we think God or the gods or the goddesses or the forces or the ancestors are to communicate with us, to the point where we block out a whole world of communication because we think it needs to come a certain way. Right. So now when I get stuck, because Asar is not communicating to me in the way that I'm used to, I now think about the conversations I had with the Kerheb in Ma'akra, and I'm saying, oh, this is what this is. Because they had that, oh, this is what this is. So now it's pushing my range of perception going on. So now what are we talking about? We're talking about the language of Neter. That is Metal Neter.
Right.
So we have to understand that there's a science to listening, and then there's a science to interpreting.
Yes.
So Neter, God, our ancestors, goddess, whatever you want to call it, is communicating with us at all times. It is always present. And that's a powerful thing. So we just have to prepare ourselves to listen and prepare ourselves to interpret. There's certain things that we've been through where, as far as we're concerned, it could have only been the gods and the ancestors that got you through it, not science and technology. There's certain things, there was no technology that could help you get through this crisis. You praying and you thinking God ain't listening, you thinking your ancestors ain't listening, you be like, I'm all messed up in the game. And all you had to do was endure. And as you endured, everything worked out to your advantage. You be like, damn, I thought I was going to be all messed up in the game and I came out on top. So yes, spirit is there all the time. Yes, Neter is there all the time. So now here's the question that everybody asks nowadays. What's the question? Where I'm going with the question, since God is present all the time.
Why do we let bad things happen?
Specifically. So they'll be like, where was God when George Floyd was getting shot or beat up? Where was God? Breonna Taylor. Breonna. So many names. It's impossible to remember all of the names. But no disrespect. Eric Garner. So we about to do libation up here.
I mean, that's going to be a long list.
That's a long list. So people rightfully ask, and this is the litmus test of spirituality or religion that they think they put us on the spot with. Well, why did God let that happen? Remember, it's always a lesson in listening and interpreting. So if God's and your ancestors and deities are always there, they're always communicating. So the problem comes, the discrepancy comes with us and our ability to listen and interpret. So let's marinate on that. So George Floyd is past. He's an ancestor now. But I'm talking about this metaphysically because they want answers. So I'm gonna address it through metaphysical and spiritual theory. And there's no disrespect to the sister that passed or the brother that passed. I'm addressing it in spiritual principle, how spiritualists see things. So if spirit is communicating at all times, and our job is to be trained, we have to train ourselves to learn how to listen and interpret properly. So if that's the case, you can do right all the time. You could be on the up all the time if you know how to listen. So now, what's that have to do with the brother? So now, the brother, whether y'all like to believe or not, he got signs that something wasn't right that day. But if he wasn't initiated in these systems where it teaches you how to pay attention and how to interpret, you're going to have to experience some things you might have not thought that you signed up to have to experience. So he could have got up in the morning and fell out the bed and laughed at himself. He's like, what the heck wrong with me? I'm goofy as hell. And then he brushed it off. Then something else could have happened. He could have knocked over a glass on the table and it broke. He'd be like, Dad, what's going on with me? Something, such. So spirit is communicating. If you don't know how to listen, if you don't know how to interpret, you just say, oh, this is curious. I need to get my thing together. So now he goes to the store. So I'm hearing he had fentanyl in the system. I don't even know what that is. It don't sound good. He was buying cigarettes for pain. So now we're talking about something that confuses your nervous system, or something that you put in your body between that and the cigarettes and what other stuff he might have been doing might have interfered. What we'll say, if it ain't pure, if it's not organic, it's going to interfere with your clarity and your perception on how you view reality, on your ability to even receive information. So his channels could have been crossed for whatever reason, because he probably wasn't trained how to listen and interpret. So it made him vulnerable for this unfortunate experience. And I'm not letting the cop off. That's still evil what the cop did. Not to say that that's justified in any manner. So we have to look, there's always the upside and there's always the downside. So we're focusing on the downside. So yes, God was present. Yes, the goddess was present. Yes, his ancestors was present. We know that because he was calling on his ancestors. His mother, what I'm hearing, was passed, and he was calling on her. So something supernatural, paranormal was going on in live time. So of course we couldn't see the ancestor, but that's what he was seeing. So a dimension was opening up. So yes, they were present. So you'd be like, why didn't they intervene? So technically now, here we go with Ma'at. Here we go with karma, the principle of karma. So I would say he didn't accrue enough good karma credit to qualify for a divine intervention. Now you start seeing why we got to do the right thing all the time. No days off. All that stuff starts accruing things, and that you start opening ways for spirit to work for you more. So everybody doesn't have the same karmic credit as the next person. So spirit will work a certain way in somebody's crisis and work something totally different for you. So be like, that's messed up. But no, it's not messed up. It's unfortunate emotionally, yeah. On the physical, yes, it's messed up. So here he is. He's seeing his mother. His mother seeing him getting brutalized. You could be like, well, why didn't his mother save him? His mother's an ancestor. Don't we speak in our tradition that we're not physical beings? Mother said, come on, baby. You're not a physical being anyway. You're a spiritual being. Come on with us. You're going to be all right. We're going to leave the body back as a symbol to inspire national unrest, to force a dialogue that people have been trying not to have for a very long time. So that's the upside of the situation. So what is the lesson? The lesson for us is sometimes, a lot of times, being good is not enough. And we hear that from spiritual people. We hear that from religious people. Be good, so as though being good is going to be our protection, and it has limits. So we have to be both good and powerful at the same time. And that starts edging things in our direction as far as African spirituality. You got the juju, you got the magic. So your spiritual system is supposed to give you some level of power and influence so that you could acquire gainful employment, make your business a little bit more successful, a lot more successful, so you could take care of yourself and your family and make considerable contributions to your village and your movement. So your spiritual system is supposed to provide you with procurements to achieve that. Secondly, your spiritual system is supposed to provide you with protection, spiritual protection, as well as physical representation of spiritual protection that you could wear on your person to protect you from evils of the world, or at least raise your frequency to the point where you're not where evil is.
Right.
Your spiritual system is supposed to have the technology for you to help you bind evil.
Yeah.
It's supposed to have the technology to give you the heads up on the who's, the what's, the where, and when and why the evil might manifest, and where it might manifest, and who it might manifest from, or where it might rear its head at. So some people will be like, well, that's a high charge. That's very incredible. And I said, well, that's the charge. Our charge, everybody's charge, is to become divine beings in the flesh. That's everybody. Everyone must have the same goal. The goal is to become a divine being in the flesh, not a doctor, a lawyer, or anything. That you can be a divine being in the flesh that happens to be a doctor, that happens to be a lawyer. Y'all see the perception? So I don't want to get into analyzing the situation. I'm just showing you how spiritualists approach looking at things like that. So yes, it's supposed to be a divine being in the flesh. So y'all understand that, and y'all say, yeah, I agree with that. Then all of a sudden y'all get distracted. But what about George Floyd? What about the others? So y'all start putting the divine being thing on the back burner, because that takes effort. That takes sustained effort. That takes work. So sometimes it's easier to be distracted than to stay on your path.
Yeah.
So now there's bad distractions, which is drugs, alcohol, and other things. There's good distractions, like your career, your business, building a family. And then there's distractions that's both good and bad, such as the death of some of our people. So it's a bad thing that we see the death of some of our people, but there's a good thing. We're coming together, we're unifying to have this force and this dialogue in a nation that's been ignored for a long time. So it's a distraction, nevertheless. It's good as well as bad. So are you saying that we shouldn't be pissed off? I'm saying, as a grown folk, you can feel any way that you want to feel. I'm talking about being a spiritualist. I'm saying, as a spiritualist, you should not, and you cannot allow yourself to be led by overly emotional people. Because that's ultimately what we're talking about. This thing happened, people are emotional. People want to know, are they justified in their emotions? Fine. You're an adult. You can feel any way that you want to feel. But as spiritualists, we don't allow ourselves to be led by emotional people. Because emotional people don't be having no plan a lot of times. In our traditions, emotions are good servants, but what?
Poor masters.
Emotions are good servants, but
Poor
masters. So we don't let emotional people be our masters. As a spiritualist and as an adult, you have the right as well as the responsibility to assess a situation for yourself, not just judge it by somebody else's emotionality. Because our whole movement as melanated people in America has been a bunch of, or I'll just say, when we get together and we're justified in our anger, we're justified in our feelings, but we have poor strategy. So that's what our movements have been led up to. So yeah, you could be mad, but you don't have no plan. So as an adult, as a spiritualist, you have the right as well as the responsibility to assess the situation for yourself. What's right about the situation? What's wrong about the situation? And if it's wrong and it doesn't fit your standard of being on the level, then you have the right not to have to participate. You cannot be bullied into being emotional because other people are emotional. So if there's something wrong with it, you have the right not to participate. Now let's elevate it. So what's right about it? What's wrong? And if it's wrong, can it be made right? Then make an educated decision. If it's wrong and can be made right, can it be made right by your knowledge and your skill set? Y'all see where it's going? So if you have the knowledge and you have the skill set, now you need to position yourself with people who's positioned themselves as leaders in this movement, which really is no leaders in this movement. It's kind of like a grassroots movement at this point. So nobody's getting paid. Everybody's out there on the strength of the matter. So what's stopping you as a spiritualist, as a solo spiritualist, to go out there on the site and speak to the person that appears to be in charge and start talking some of your ideas to them? And be like, yo, these are my thoughts or whatever. Several things can happen in that conversation. Several things can happen. They could just be like, fool, get out my face. I got this. Or they could be like, wow, I never thought of it in that way. They might get behind you. They might abdicate the authority to you because you might be making more sense. You might be more insightful. You might be more circumspect. And they be like, I'm going to get behind you. You might even be more articulate. You might have a little bit more charisma, and you should have charisma if you've really been doing the work. Some of y'all been doing the work 5 years, 10 years. If you've been doing the work that long, if you've been doing the work every day, you should have more charisma or something more magnetic to you than just the average person. So, or they could, like I said, they could abdicate the authority to you, or they could keep you as their consigliere. They be like, yo, stay close to me. I appreciate your perspective. What you say? What powder we gotta throw? So now here you are as a spiritualist, you could strategically place yourself in that position. So all I'm saying is find out what's the position for you in this whole scheme of things. We gotta have a strategy. Everybody can't have the same approach. For instance, they say turn the other cheek, right? And they say that is a spiritual philosophy, and it is, but it's a half metaphor. Certain things, yeah, you could take a hit for. You be like, all right, you got that off. And certain things require a response. Mm-hmm. Certain things, I translate things as a warrior. So somebody hit me, I'll be like, okay, you got that off. It's not worth me breaking you up on it. But there's other strategies. So why are you sitting there getting hit? Why are you sitting there looking for cheeks to hit? You be like, okay, I got the other cheek. Then after that, got my 2 ass cheeks. So what happens when you run out of cheeks? That's all I'm saying. What happens that there's other strategies? What about moving back when somebody strikes? What about sidestepping? What about sidestepping and moving forward? You see what I'm saying? It's a whole strategy. You don't got to be sitting up here getting beat up or exposing yourself to things like that. So I'm hearing this even a conversation saying that the whole situation is a fraud. You heard that?
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to get into that because that's crazy. Because at this point, it really doesn't matter because it sparked a necessary dialogue. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we get kind of crazy with the conspiracy theories and stuff like that. And we just have to make a decision. Like, remember, just 2 months ago, people saying it was a conspiracy to keep us in the house. The coronavirus, or the 5G radiation is out there, so they need us in the houses. They put up the 5G centers and stuff. The radiation is too high outside. Right. So now somebody's saying it's a conspiracy to get us out the house. And be like, come on, man, what is it? We got to stay in the house, or we're going to be outside the house, so we're going to die if we stay in the house because our immune system is going to shut down, or we go out there, the big boogeyman, demon, coronavirus is out there, martial law is out there. So now we have to get to the point where it's like, okay, why are we always finding ourselves in this position where we're reacting and responding to somebody else's conspiracy against us? So when are we going to decide what's our conspiracy? When are we going to decide when we're going to turn our reaction into proaction?
Yes.
So this dialogue is being forced. There are some changes, and a lot of jobs are changing. A lot of their policies about racial insensitivity. Right. I'm seeing a lot of actors and actresses getting fired and let go out of their contracts off of some racial insensitive stuff they said 2 years ago. I seen one fitness expert got fired from their job because they made a workout program called I Can't Breathe. Mm-hmm. They got let go. So the dialogue is changing. It's starting to be at the beginning of meaning something to be black. I know the sister said we should be calling ourselves white, but now we got attention on this black word. We got attention. People are making changes. In Minneapolis, aren't they reconstructing the police system?
Yes,
they are. What did
they are defunding the police in order to reallocate funding to a more community model that emphasizes social services that emphasizes social work, that emphasizes resources to the community, and does not rely entirely and solely upon police to maintain law and order, which I think is one of the main, if people have heard of the hashtag defund the police, what that means is that police need riot gear and they need guns to run up on a murderer, but they don't need riot gear and guns to respond to like a child who got lost on their way home from school. Like,
Sure.
it's not necessary. Like, that is we talked before about like the response to a situation being
Sure.
out of balance. That is an imbalanced response. You don't need a whole police force like coming out in riot gear and military outfits and guns because your child came home, or your child didn't get home on time from school.
Sure.
Or because you got home and your neighbor's dog got into your garden. Like, there's no need for a gun for that, no need for a cop for that. So there has to be like proper community responses.
Sure.
And the proper services in the community to respond to those things. And so Minneapolis is taking the first initial steps to reconfigure their community services in order to do that.
True. So, with all that being said, so this is more than just demanding justice that these 4 cops go to jail or get the death penalty. That's one trajectory. But the real problem is the police system. So now they have to change the policies in the police system, because that's the thing that spawned these people to do what it is that they do. So it's more important than just sending these cats to jail. It's about changing the system. So Minneapolis kind of set something in motion, and if the other states are smart, they'll have to start falling in line with that also.
And can I just add to that, like, the real problem is racism. So it's still like we still have like the police system is a column that holds up and enforces racism that needs to be dismantled, and there are a lot of other columns as we dismantle racism that will need to come down as well. So this is still just a step, right, in the process, because as you dismantle the institution of racism, there are many columns that uphold that institution that need to be taken down and reconfigured.
And we have to stay on this movement generationally.
Yes.
So the cure is not going to be anything today, tomorrow, even next year. It's going to be generationally.
Yeah.
That's how all other nations are thinking except our nation. So nobody's hijacked our movement. I saw somebody say that. Nobody's hijacked it. We just need to have intelligent grown folk conversation amongst ourselves in these forums about what is it going to be to us, and stop reacting to less informed individuals that's putting themselves in leadership positions.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing stopping anyone from any of our circles of doing the same thing, putting themselves in those leadership positions. But let's bring it home. It goes back to character. We call Ked Nefer. They say Iwa Pele or Iwa Rere in Ifa. What is good character for us? It's about being in tune with self, being in tune with our ancestors and our spirit guides, and being in tune with nature. And having our needs addressed by being in tune with said things. When my food, clothing, and the shelter is adequate, when her food, clothing, and shelter is adequate, when their food, clothing, and shelter is adequate, we're living in harmony with nature. That is the African approach. Now, contrast that with the Western approach. They want to dominate nature, and they want to control resources and keep us, the less fortunate, from the resources. They be like, I want it all for me and my family, and I'm going to keep it secret, and I'm going to play unfair. And I'm going to create an illusion on what it means to have this status and this resources. And these things confuse us sometimes. So I'm going to go to the Hosea. The book of Ptah Hotep. It said, for bread is made to be shared. So it goes off of your commentary is, when I'm good, you're good. When you're good, I'm good. When you're doing bad, I'm doing bad. When I'm doing bad, so it's talking about collective responsibility. So for the bread is made to be shared. Those whose bellies are empty turn into accusers, and those who are deprived become opponents. See that none such as these are your neighbors. Generosity is a memorial for those who show it. long after they are departed. I'm going to go down to another one that says, for what belongs to one friend belongs to another. The character of the righteous is an honor to bring him or her a thing of value which is long remembered. So it's talking about responsibility. Like I said, when I'm good, you're good. When you're good, I'm good. If I'm suffering, you're suffering. If you're suffering, I'm suffering. So it's putting us in this place where we have to be responsible for not just our money, our health, our wealth, and our well-being of one another.
Right.
I keep saying on this platform, we can have all the information we want in the world, but the hardest thing to do is to teach people to care. That's where we're really stuck at. This is not about political strategy. Have we got to the point where we really care? Why do we need trauma to wake up this thing in us periodically, then it lulls back to sleep, and we stop caring 6 months down the line?
Yeah.
So, now, what they call that? Socialism? When everybody's on the same level?
Yes.
Socialism.
A lot of people don't like that. Socialism. What's the difference between socialism and communism? Is it pretty much the same thing?
No, there's a difference. I don't know if I can explain
All
it.
right. So,
But there's a
say,
difference.
so they would say the African paradigm is a socialist paradigm, where it's kind of like level across the board, everybody's good. While the Western paradigm is like, no, select people who are smart, who consider themselves smarter, and they play tricks on other people who are pretty much good and decent people who are down for looking out for one another, and they take advantage of that, and they control the resources. So where am I going? So yeah, I'm saying intellectually and intuitively, we want to do the right thing, the Ma'at thing, and yeah, I want my needs met. But we have to deal with the fact that we're secretly craving to act like Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we're I ain't gonna say secretly craving to act like European. I'll say we're secretly tempted.
Yes.
And a lot of us are in denial about our temptation. But the temptation is justified in a sense, because us as African descendants in America, we're not pure blood. We don't come directly from Nigeria, Ghana, and all of these places. We're mixed. We got that stuff in our blood. So it ain't just about us watching them. We got white ancestors in our blood that's telling us to do that thing too. So at any given time, you got a whole bunch of ancestral inclinations going on at you on any given time. So if you don't know yourself, you don't know which ancestral line is dominant at the time of these feelings, because it could be very transient, it could be very fluent. That's why knowledge of self is key.
Yeah.
So now we have to ask ourselves, so am I really okay with just my needs being met? Because in an African sense, I got food, clothing, and shelter, and it's decent. I'm good. You good too. You got your food, clothing, and shelter. You good. The other paradigm teaches, I got decent food, clothing, and shelter, but I'm still broke. I got decent food, clothing, and shelter, but I want more. Right. So now that thing is infiltrated our mind. It's now activated in our blood. So now we have subconscious or fanciful theories on the back of our mind about wanting more, and we're guilty about wanting more. So now we have to ask ourselves, is it okay for me to have space to want more, not just more, but a whole lot more? And can I get that without wreaking havoc or imbalance on the planet? That's another conversation we need to have. What does that look like? Can we stay in balance, in tune with nature, as character is defined in the African tradition as Iwa Pele, Iwa Rede, and Ked Nefer? I'm in tune with my family, self, nature. That's cool. That's esoteric, and that's a high philosophy. But is it really enough for us in America?
Yeah.
So now, in closing, because ultimately what we're doing is we're defending the stance as spiritualists on how we're supposed to see and how we're supposed to move. And there's always this harsh criticism on religious or spiritual folks, like, where y'all at in all of this? So I say, judge us by our own merits. I'll repeat, judge us by our own merits. So when you see a boxer, you judge a boxer about how well he does in the ring.
Right.
You don't judge a boxer by a healer's regimen. So when you see the healer, you judge the healer by his resume about how many people he's healed. When you see an activist, you judge an activist about what it is that they specialize in.
Yeah.
So now when you see a spiritualist, what do we specialize in? We specialize in the unseen aspects of life. We specialize in character development. We specialize in the character to help you live in your truth. That's Ankh and Ma'at. Live in your truth as well as endure the consequences and the situations that may come about because of you living the truth or living your truth. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave it at that.
That's a good place to leave it. That's
Here's
it.
my bingo.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, you should have gave me the tutor first. So I could be like, he dropped the mic. All right, we'll check out the comments a little. I see Lisa said, communism, the government owns and controls everything. Socialism, individuals can still own property. Dua for that. I think there's more to it than that, than just about owning property. But that is a helpful place to start in terms of understanding the distinction.
Yeah.
Majudi Ross says, these are all good steps, but the question is, what do we as people of African descent actually want? I say reparations. You know, while Majudi Ross, I would say that, I'll let you answer this too in a second, but I will say, if you ask 20 different people, you might get 20 different answers.
Sure.
I would say that my concern about how we talk about what we want is about not just about what we get in this moment, but also how that resonates out into our future.
Sure.
So, you know, like for example, like you have a black person who is shot by the police, and that particular police officer goes to jail, but then the next black person still gets shot by the police. That demonstrates that there's an issue in the system. And so you don't just want one person to go to jail, you want the system to be reformed, right? So I think it's important that we think about what our demands are, or what it is that we want in terms of how we are reforming the system, and how we are requiring justice to be a natural aspect of how this country runs, and that, like, you know, we are no longer tolerating or allowing for these behaviors to continue.
Sure.
Or for racism to continue, for sexism, classism, whatever the ism is, that those institutions can no longer prevail, because you may get, you know, justice in a case, like we just talked about with the police system. Like, yes, Minneapolis is changing the police system, and that is justice in Minneapolis. But how does that affect all the other states, all the other counties, all the other cities?
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect the future of African people on a broader scale? How does that affect racism in banking? How does that affect racism in housing? How does that affect racism in education? How does that, you understand what I'm saying? So that's a big question and a big conversation to be had that I don't think any one person can answer. And yeah.
So it goes back to thinking generationally.
Yeah.
And in thinking generationally, you have to be thinking generationally in the sense of taking over.
Yeah.
Because, like, when we ask for reparations, I still begging your oppressor to be fair. So you're going to have to change the system. Therefore, you have to plan to take it over.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have to seize it. There's going to be a time you're going to have to seize your power.
Yeah. Kurti asked what page did Naswt read from. He read from page 47 in the Hosea, the book of Ptah-hotep.
Yeah.
Okay. I saw a question over here. How do you find Ma'at in all of the confusion regarding to your ancestors? How do you connect? How do you connect to your ancestors? Is that the question? I'm going to leave that question, I think, so we can address that maybe next week at the Crook and the Flail.
Did not address the ancestor thing last time?
I feel like I've heard it come up a couple of times.
What's the question again?
The question is, how do you find Ma'at in all of the confusion regarding your ancestors? How do you connect?
What do they mean by confusion regarding your ancestors?
That's a good question. I think at the moment that we were talking about that, you were talking about how some of us are you know, have the African influence from our African ancestors, and then have the capitalistic white influences from our European ancestors. And so the question is, like, how do you find Ma'at in that confusion?
Like I said, we got to start off by addressing our ancestors that we need to be empowered. We got to start off by healing those ancestors, and going back far as you possibly can in your ancestral line, because when you go back as far as you can in that ancestral line, you heal the whole lineage. So you don't have to necessarily deal with an ancestor on a one-by-one basis. It's blood, so you heal the bloodline, then elevate the bloodline. And that's things African traditional religion specializes in. So it's not a freestyle thing, but it's, a matter of fact, in the African tradition, you put the ancestors before the deities in a sense like that, or do it simultaneously. But all I can say that like that's a conversation for initiates in all the various traditions. But you start with setting up your altar to the ancestors that you do know, the ancestors that you are connected to, the ancestors that you do require or request help from. So it starts with candle, glass of water, white sheet on the table, some incense and some fruit. So that's the beginning of your journey, and pour out libations to them. You call their names and just start having a conversation, whether in your head or to yourself. That's the beginning of that journey. So in traditional African religions and spirituality, they teach you how to enhance that process. So once again, I go back to what I said before. This is not a fast food thing. So I just told you that, but you'll still go and still probably be intimidated by it. So you're going to need probably some help and some instruction to relax about the process. So that's why we have to think generationally. This is not a fast food process. In the Kemetic tradition, it said it took 30 years for somebody to really get grounded in these things. So that was our ancestors that we venerate on this high level. So here we are in 2020 asking for fast food. Resolutions to timeless problems that's always been there. As we read from the text last time, they was dealing with the same stuff we was dealing with in their own own time. So there was revolutions, there was invasions, there was colonizations, and there was a time where they had to seize their power back. So this is not unique for us. So once again, we got to do that ancestor work and ask for that clarity, ask for that backing, ask for that power, and then position ourselves to be open to receive that also. Because right nowadays, us as melanated people, we have this very intellectual approach to spirituality. We want to understand the heck out of everything, but we haven't allowed ourselves open to experience our things. A lot of stuff that you think you're asking for, it'll spook the hell out of you. And a lot of that stuff is why people are scared of African tradition. So you think it's a one-way thing. I'm going to talk to my ancestors. What about when they start talking back? What about when they start coming to you in your dreams?
Or showing up in the corner.
Showing up in the corner.
Let me tell you, you turn off the light and your ancestors sitting in the corner, you're going to learn today.
And you ask for it.
So the follow-up question was, is there a test I can take, DNA test, to find out where my African ancestors come from? Yes, you can go to AfricanAncestry.com, which is a Black-owned ancestry DNA company that will connect you back to the tribes and countries of your ancestral origins. So that's AfricanAncestry.com. Okay. And I think we talked about that also.
And after you get all of that, you're going to have to make them white ancestors give up the ghost and work for you.
Yeah. You still their bloodline. Like, why not? Like, you want as much power coming from your ancestors as possible. So, yeah. Okay.
That's got to be worth like a $5 donation.
Yeah. All right. So thank you guys again for joining us. Thank you all for the donations. If you are able to and willing to send a donation, you may do so on Cash App, which is $Temple of Anu, or you can do so on PayPal. templeofanu@gmail.com is the email address that you can use to send us a donation by PayPal. And again, $Temple of Anu is our Cash App. Thank you so much in advance for your donations and for the energy that you send us in reciprocity for the energy that we have given out to you guys today. It's greatly appreciated, and it assists us with continuing the work that we are charged to do with the spiritual community.
Let's hear some comment. Like, how are we doing addressing these issues as we all work through it together? Are y'all satisfied with our explanations of things? Like, we need to know. Like, we don't know how are we doing in addressing the concerns of the day through the perspective of our, traditional African religion as well as Kemmunion.
You guys are doing great from Tyree on YouTube.
Do I, Tari?
Kayeka says, I think you are on point.
Do I?
Wabba Rod says, I think we can go deeper.
Nah.
Wabba Rod, you going to do next communion. Since we're not deep
it's
enough.
no deeper. Just think about what God said, because it's your responsibility, and it also, like, it's the difference between giving a person a metaphor, then you explaining the hell out of the metaphor, then you take away the experience of the metaphor. Like, each person is supposed to experience the metaphor. So we're dealing with the stuff. We're throwing the philosophy out there. We're giving solutions. Now everybody has to take responsibility and find out how they could build on it.
Yeah.
And once again, the revolution won't be televised. So all of that ain't supposed to necessarily be happening live time.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell you that again, with Judy. Revolution.
No, I think we should just make him do communion. That's all. I think we should make him have the next one. Anuka Ruth said very balanced, and Kathy says always satisfied. I feel like I'm in college with professors.
Oh, wow.
Hey.
I think it's always on time, but some people might just be late to the conversation. Curti says, I feel like I'm getting clarity on these topics. I saw over here these sessions are helpful, and plus we can go back and look at them again. That's correct. They are on YouTube and on Facebook. You guys can watch them all over again. So please, again, go back and watch, because we talked about ancestry, the AfricanAncestry.com, and the DNA and dealing with ancestors in one of our previous videos. Like, some of these topics is things that we've discussed and spoken about before. So go back and watch those videos, and like Naswt said, then contemplate on those topics. Take that into your meditation and allow that to take you to a deeper level of understanding and understanding through doing the work. Because there's just some things that we just can't explain. You just gotta know. And if you don't know, you don't know. And when you know, then you'll just know. Like, what is known don't gotta be explained. It's just that simple. Like, it is what it is.
And it is your responsibility to be in the know.
Too, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for Makra for putting a reminder in the chat. If you have questions for the next Crook and Flail, please email us at templeofanu@gmail.com. We do take questions ahead of time for the Crook and Flail, which has a different
from Bob Heru that we'll address at the Crook and Flail
religion or spiritual culture. Yeah. So we do take more questions at the Crook and Flail. It's a more interactive format, and it also starts later in the day. So we'll be on next Sunday at 3 p.m. For our next episode of the Crook and Flail. And again, thank you guys for the energy that you're sharing with us today and always. And we will be back here again next Sunday. All right? Shami Matab.